Today, the Senate Subcommittee on Public Lands, Forests, and Mining will hold a hearing on various pieces of pending legislation. The purpose of the hearing is to receive testimony from the Forest Service and from the Department of the Interior on a total of 13 bills. These bills cover a pretty wide range of issues, from considerations of land use and rural economic development to protecting our forests and rural communities from destructive and deadly wildfires. The complete agenda will be included in the record. I was excited to see provisions of the University of Alaska Fiscal Foundation Act addressing promises made to the university multiple times, including in the Enabling Act for the state of Alaska. Agreements struck in the state's Enabling Act are especially and unusually important. They need to be honored. I'd say that these are somewhat sacred commitments that are made. When a territory enters into the Union as a state, it does so with specific considerations, carefully negotiated and devised. I'm sure the state of Alaska and the university are very excited to see this promise fulfilled. The state of Utah has its own Enabling Act, which promises that land shall be sold by the United States subsequent to the admission of said state into the Union. Similar language can be found in Enabling Acts for Missouri and South Dakota and many other states, ended up being honored over time. Almost all of the federally owned land in those states was transferred to the state or sold decades ago. But Congress has not honored that promise to sell federal land in Utah, but it should. And this is not something that we should disregard. That doesn't mean every scrap of federal land, but certainly those pieces of federal land, at least those that don't amount to either national parks or declared wilderness or something of that sort. There's no reason why the default should be that 2/3 of the land inside of a sovereign state's boundaries ought to be held in perpetuity by the federal government. I'm fighting back to make sure Congress keeps that promise and to mitigate the damage the federal government is inflicting on rural communities in the meantime. That damage isn't limited to the economic harm. It also includes significant environmental harm that has resulted from the fact that we've simply got too much land under federal ownership. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about the two wildfire and forest management bills that we have on the agenda. We have Senator Wyden's National Prescribed Fire Act of 2020. It proposes to expand the use of prescribed fire across federal, state, tribal, local, and private lands. The other bill is Senator Mcsally's Forest Health and Biomass Energy Act. This bill proposes federal assistance to cover the cost of hauling low-value biomass out of forest restoration projects for energy production. We held an active and deadly we had an active and very deadly fire season this year. And so it's especially critical that we expand our efforts to effectively and actively manage our forests using all the tools in our toolbox and to expand that toolbox whenever possible. I'd note that although prescribed fire is an important component of forest management, it's not a substitute for mechanical thinning that often must occur first. Management can bring about an effective means of prevention, and prevention is worth a whole lot of cure. I also want to highlight two bills on the agenda that are important to the people of my home state of Utah. S-4215, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail Advancement Act, and S-1695, the Human Powered Travel in Wilderness Areas Act. Both bills deal with the issue of trail use in federal wilderness areas. An estimated 40 million Americans engage in mountain biking every year. It's the second most popular trail activity in the United States. And Utah's diverse terrain and scenery makes it a world-class biking destination. Although mountain biking is allowed on most public lands in Utah and across the nation, it's restricted inside federally designated wilderness and federally managed wilderness study areas. The Wilderness Act of 1964 prohibits motorized or mechanized transport in wilderness. The Forest Service's first regulations for wilderness were issued in 1966, and they banned only those devices powered by a, quote, non-living power source, close quote. thus allowing for human-powered transport, like bicycles. It was not until the 1970s that the Forest Service changed its regulations to prohibit bikes in wilderness. The Department of the Interior has had a similar story. My bill S-1695 would address this issue by amending the Wilderness Act to ensure that the rules restricting mechanical transport do not include forms of human-powered, non-motorized travel. Additionally, the bill would grant federal land managers at the local level the authority to determine whether, where, and when to allow non-motorized travel over existing particular routes. The Bonneville Shoreline Trail Advancement Act, S-4215, of which I was an original co-sponsor, would advance a locally driven initiative to complete the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. The bill would adjust the boundary of wilderness to exclude segments of the trail in Salt Lake County, where 75% of the population resides. Utahns are asking Congress to act because they cherish the trails and want them open to more recreation areas, including mountain biking. As our nation continues to fight the spread of COVID-19 and support our economic recovery, Congress must ensure that we continue to promote families and friends safely participating in activities that allow for social distancing. Outdoor recreational activities like biking are some examples of that activity, and I hope that we can advance these two bills in order to support it. Another component of our recovery is to ensure the United States does not rely on supply chains, particularly of critical minerals, from foreign adversaries. We should be looking to streamline regulations that promote responsible energy development on public lands and to unlock domestic mineral resources wherever possible. I would say to my colleagues that it would be a grievous mistake to undo what we and what the current administration have accomplished over the last 4 years, especially during a global pandemic. Energy jobs in the West contribute significantly to America's energy independence. And now more than ever, American families are depending on a return to the soaring economy that preceded COVID-19. I look forward to hearing testimony from today's witnesses on the legislation pending before the subcommittee.